Township News 1, hosted by AC Justice, bringing you the best in news and entertainment. Let's give thanks to our special guests. Remember, we do all sides, the accused, the accuser, and then we fact check. And also, a special edition of Crime Grind. Let's get ready to be informed. Join us. Township News 1, all copyrights reserved.
Ms. Jenny, it is now 6 o'clock. Would you call the roll, please?
Yes. Mayor Dina Sweat.
Here.
Vice Mayor Mike Raddick.
Here.
Councilmember John Griffin, absent. Councilmember Tim Lowes.
Here.
Councilmember Mike Smith.
Here.
City Manager Mike Hine.
Here.
City Attorney Anita Gerasi Carter.
Here.
Sergeant at Arms Armando Loney.
Here.
City Clerk Virginia Wright here.
Okay, we will go to the first reading of ordinance 2018-09-30, adoption of fiscal year 2019 millage rate.
Ordinance 2018-09-30, an ordinance adopting a millage rate of 5.2000 per $1,000 valuation for regular ad valorem taxes to be levied during the fiscal year of the City of Groveland, Florida, from October 1st, 2018 through September 30th, 2019, and providing for an effective date. The millage rate of 5.2000 for fiscal year October 1st, 2018 through September 30th, 2019 represents a 5.52% increase over the rollback ad valorem rate of 4.9276 for the fiscal year ending September 30th, 2019.
Thank you, Ms. Jenny. Do I have a motion?
I move that the city adopt a millage rate of 5.2%.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Is there any discussion?
Actually, I'd like to hear a little bit from the city manager as to some of the changes from the workshop.
Yeah, Madam Mayor, Vice Mayor, members of the council, good evening. Thank you very much. This is the first of 2 public hearings, so with your permission, I'll give kind of a general overview, talk about some of the changes that have been made since the second workshop, and talk a little bit about some of the nuances. I want to thank Dave and the finance staff again for the good work, and also want to recognize John Terlou, your new finance director, who's in the audience tonight. I told him that this falls under that first envelope of management principles, meaning he doesn't have to take any responsibility. He can blame Dave and I. Unless it goes really well, then he takes lots of credit. So anyhow, and he has assisted today in at least the presentation throughout the afternoon. You know, the budget that we're presenting to you for your consideration under first read for the budget and for the mill rate, as well as with the subsequent item, reflects about 26.27 million in revenues combined with carry forwards of fund balances from the previous year, totaling 52.62 million for a total budget. Expenditures are projected to be 36.6 million, leaving a $16 million reserve requirement based on the policies and the recommended adoption of levels that you had through the budget workshops. Capital improvements represent 17.68 million and an operating budget of 18.92. What that basically, when you do all the math, we're bringing in 26.27 and we're spending 36.6. What that means is we're spending more than we're taking in because we're going to aggressively start beginning some of the capital improvements that have been talked about. So out of those reserves being carried forward, we're going to start spending some of that money. There are 9.5 new FTEs proposed in the budget, and we can discuss some of those things. In front of you this evening, you have two changes or two new worksheets, basically as a result of your discussion in the workshop and the CRA meeting, special meeting that you had in regard to that budget. At that time, you authorized staff to move forward, earmarking some individual programs that were broken out into streetscape, infrastructure, and other projects. We also removed the $5,000 towards landscape maintenance and moved that into an expense category in the city manager's budget for, I believe, Dave, professional services. So we moved that into the professional services line item for the city manager. We also took what was in the city manager's budget for certain salary and market adjustments. We had two components. One is a market adjustment representing 3%.
Mr. Hine, can I ask you something? Do you think maybe you want to wait for all that explanation until we talk about the budget, since this is about the millage rate?
Well, Madam Mayor, Vice Mayor, my apologies if you think that is customary.
Yeah, let's just get finished with the millage rate and go from there.
Can do that.
One question. I've got an issue until we discuss the budget. How are we going to set a millage rate? We go through this every year. It's just a question of mine. We're setting a millage rate, but yet we haven't discussed the budget that we're setting it for.
I think the millage rate is the first thing that needs to be discussed by law, but I hear you.
Yeah, it's kind of always, for years I've always said, how can we set a millage rate until we discuss what's in the budgets? But we always seem to end up back with setting a millage rate prior to find out what we're setting it for. And one thing that caught my attention was the capital projects, discretionary spending that's going on. The enterprise fund, I've got some issues we need to discuss, and I know that some of the monies in that discretionary fund will be used for capital projects in the utility department. So I don't know exactly the protocol or how we want to address this, but if we set a 5.52 millage rate, or what, I'm sorry, 5.2 millage rate, and then we go in and find out there's some issues in that enterprise fund, we may be setting differently than what we need to be set for the simple reason we may be able to shift some of those discretionary funds that should be paid with impact fees out of the wastewater or the enterprise fund to pay for that, which would give us more discretionary funds to spend on capital projects in the general fund. So I'm a little bit confused if we set this millage rate, we're pretty much setting this budget at the same time.
My only comment, Mr. Hine and council, is that with the 5.2 millage rate, I think that we have growth paying for itself. We've increasing the amount of staff that's sorely needed, and I think that it's a conservative number, and also helps us out next year with regards to any pressures on the possible additional $25,000 homestead exemption.
The problem is where our enterprise fund is running negative $900,000, which will be subsidized by discretionary monies. So we can't really say that our
The enterprise fund is based on user rates. It's not really millage rate driven, but I do understand that the discretionary, of course, does have some flexibility to it. But when we talk about the enterprise fund, that has nothing to do with millage rate.
Well, it does when you can take that $900,000 and use that for some of the general fund capital projects. We were able to do a little more with this millage rate if we were able to shift that $900,000 back into the general fund.
And that would be discretionary monies that you can't use to balance your general fund anyway by way of operations. If anything, that discretionary money could be pumped back into the general fund to do something like a park or streets or otherwise. So either way, it's not going to affect the millage rate. Do I have that right, Dave? Yeah. Because again, discretionary money that's in there, which I hear what Mr. Laux is saying, and we shouldn't be, and we're off topic again because we're talking about millage, would not have anything to do with the millage rate.
Ms. Dita, is there a reason why we do millage before we do budget?
The statute requires it be in that order, that you adopt your millage rate and then you adopt your budget.
So in other words, we have to adopt our millage rate because that's what's going to define how much money we can make our budget out of.
Correct.
And I appreciate what you're talking about on the enterprise fund, and the same thing that Mr. Razik is, but unfortunately on our agenda is nothing about going ahead and raising our water rates as per the water rate study's findings. So unfortunately we're still stuck at this point in time subsidizing our water use. So I'll just, subsidizing points, that's just where we're at.
And you are correct, that is per statute. I was just wanted to bring up the point. I've always felt it should be the other way because we're more or less locking ourselves into a millage rate that is prior to looking completely and discussing the complete budget, but unfortunately that's what we're locked into doing. So with that being said, I just wanted to make note and for the record that the enterprise fund I feel has some issues in it. And to address your raising the water rates, you might want to get a valid water rate study before you consider doing that, because of what we have is not.
Yeah, well, that's a good topic for another discussion because we can go broke waiting for a good valid rate. But the issue to me is that as I understand how this process worked, and this is my first year going through it, is we did set a budget of 5.6 actually as our millage rate. And based upon our budget workshop and working with the city manager and others, we have been able to craft a budget that's based down at 5.2, which is 0.4 below what we actually authorized the city manager to build his budget against. So I think we've done what you're saying we should do, which is work it, and then we're finalizing it now as per the statute.
Kind of what concerns me is that we had a 16.88% increase, and so actually we're having a 5.52 increase over the rollback rate, even though we did set a 5.6 not to exceed. So that just simply meant we couldn't exceed 5.6, but that did not mean that we could not go lower than 5.6 or 5.2. I don't know that we can. 5.2 is a pretty good millage rate. I'm not arguing that point, but I just want to clarify that we're still 5.52% over the rollback rate based on the current year's revenues.
Any more discussion?
Other than to thank Mr. Hine and the staff for actually bringing in at the workshop 5.2 versus the not to exceed. I think it streamlined the process quite a bit. It was reasonable, and thank you very much for your efforts.
I think staff and you, Mr. Hine, did a very good job on the budget. Is there any public?
And just so long as I'm clear, I'm talking about the 5.2 millage rate, not the budget, and that's some concerns that I will have.
Is there any public comment on this issue?
Right, Feeney, 104 Miss Flower Lane. Someday it'll go up easily. It took a bit of, I asked David some questions before, and I think I can clear my mind, but in essence, even though we're keeping the millage rate the same as the prior year, it is an increase for every taxpayer in the city, offset by full valuation for all the classes of 2016, 2017, which became taxable for this year because they were around on January 1. It should be a large amount of money, and once again, it's going to contribute to an imbalance of houses that lived through the last recession and houses built after that, whereby 70 to 80% of the tax base of the city and residents of houses built after 2012. Very little is contributed by the old real estate in the city, commercial being the bogey that's in between, and I don't really have the statistics on that. So I think the council has to understand that a disproportionate share is paid by newer residents compared to historical residents of the city when they set these rates. It's not just simple math, but there are some limitations. You got the, it's got 2.5–3% cap, but everybody, that is the tax increase for the bulk of the people that are below the waterline. The recession, it really doesn't matter. Their valuation is $70,000, $80,000. They can live up the same small percentage. So there's a disproportionate amount for people that have bought or built in the city in the last 5 years, as well as continuing development. The city has a multiple tiered tax rate where the state of Florida doesn't require a reevaluation of properties every 6 years like other states do. So, just be aware that you are playing with real money, and it is a real amount of money to a lot of people. It's not insignificant, even though the millage rate is the same. Everybody's basically getting a minimum of 3%, and on a lot of the newer residents, which is more than probably half the city's population, it is the full 3% of a larger number. So just keep that in mind. I understand there's a lot of funding that has to happen during the good years to make up for reduced spending to get through the bad years, but try to keep that line as flat as possible. Please spend the money like it's coming out of your pocket and it's the last $10 you have, not $10 you found on the sidewalk or $10 that you're going to get next month, because it's real money and it has going to have a real impact on people who live in this community. Taxes always creep up until the next recession. We reset and go forward again with some leveling. But anyway, just thought that when we're talking about millage, that's the problem with millage. It's one number in the stratosphere. It is not necessarily a real number that's the same value or impact on every person. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Any more public comment? Public comment is closed.
Mr. Finance, I would just like to point out one thing, and what this gentleman was saying is so true. We actually have houses that are valued at maybe $125,000, and then directly across the street, we have a house that's identical in size and build in the same neighborhood that's being valued at $325,000. And the state of Florida's recession devalued a lot of homes more than half. And so I can certainly sympathize with the situation that newer residents have, because they're actually going to experience a 5.52 increase in a higher value home than, for instance, I would experience, because my home lost value during the Great Recession, as they call it, or the Depression, but the Great Recession. My home lost almost half of its value, but directly across the street from me is a home that's pretty much identical in square footage, taxable value, but yet it has a higher taxable value because it was built after recession. So those folks are really going to feel this 5.52 more so than the residents that were previous here. There's not a lot that we can do about that. Unfortunately, you're only allowed to raise, or the tax appraiser's only able to raise the taxable values 3% a year. So mine, for instance, will probably never catch up to my neighbor across the street or the neighbor next to me. But we just need to take in consideration we are impacting these folks that have higher assessed values for the same home, the newer residents. So thank you so much for bringing that up, sir. I appreciate it.
Any more council comment? Mr. Razzak, how do you vote?
Aye.
Mr. Smith?
Aye.
Mr. Louds?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Moving on to item number 2, first reading of ordinance 2018-09-31, adoption of the fiscal year 2019 budget.
Ordinance 2018-09-31, an ordinance adopting a budget for the city of Groveland, Florida, fiscal year beginning October 1st, 2018 through September 30th, 2019, and providing for an effective date.
Do I have a motion?
I'm motion to approve the 2018-2019 budget.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Is there any discussion on this item?
Now it's maybe relevant for Mr. Hine to continue.
Yeah, Madam Mayor, Vice Mayor, members of the council, with your permission, let me kind of give the overall picture, talk about some of the changes that were incorporated based on the feedback. We're pleased to be before you this evening with a recommended budget for the first read for the 2018-19 fiscal year. Again, total balance, or total budget reflects about $52.62 million. Of that is revenues of 26.27 with expenditures of 36.6. We are looking looking to increase our efforts on expending previous capital projects that have been planned but not executed. And we hope to provide excellent service to the community. Some of the changes that were made, we did have 2 budget workshops along with a CRA budget presentation. During the course of those meetings, certain changes were made. From the last budget workshop, we moved certain pots of funding that was in city manager budget and spread that throughout the departments that would be affected. One was a market compensation-based study performed by Christy Higdon in Human Resources that showed inequity in some of the positions based on regional benchmarks. That was approximately $45,995. The 3% market adjustment across departments in the general fund represented $198,741. We removed, as I mentioned, the mowing expenses from the CRA to the city manager budget. And we also reduced, if you recall, I left the whiteboard out. We talked about the inherent structural imbalance or subsidy of the enterprise funds that was mentioned by Councilman Locks earlier. We had showed at that time CIP 1.3 from discretionary tax sources which could be used in alternative CIP projects for the general government. That was reduced to $1 million, but we also reallocated some of the expense and now have a deficit which is slightly lower, and we'll get into that. We overstated $200,000 due to an Excel error, and I apologize for that, in license and renewals. So the net result of the deficit in the enterprise funds for water, wastewater, and reclaim came to $814,492. There were some questions that came to staff's attention between the CRA budget meeting, the workshops, and today's meeting, and just wanted to, in the spirit of transparency, talk about that. One was a question regarding $244,000 in salary adjustments in the city manager budget, and that was indeed part of that salary compensation study and COLAs that were spread to the other departments, so it now appears in each of those departments. There was a question about economic development. Specifically, there's $200,000 in line 485 for economic incentives, and that appeared to be in addition to some other monies in the CRA budget totaling $400,000. In actuality, there's $200,000 in the general fund and $50,000 in the CRA for $250,000 for that line item. But there's an additional $100,000 in the CRA budget for business assistance programming or line 488. So that's a total of $350,000. We were asked about $2,000 in the employee appreciation event. That has been a historical allocation earmarked by councils for an end of year, if you will, celebration party. And I've just carried that forward and includes all employees of the city. We have had questions recently and in the past about why legal is so high. Actually, legal is, we're recommending a reduction of $75,000 in this year, and it covers all legal fees, not just the services of the city attorney. When I look at that from my experience, I believe it to be a tremendous value given the services provided, and we can talk further if you'd like. There was a question about why there's not more resources identified for comp plan amendments, and the short answer to that is because we anticipate the majority of that work needs to be done before the new fiscal year, so it'll be completed this fiscal year. There is some carry forward, however. We did allocate resources specifically in the police budget for the Explorers next year in the amount of $8,000, and that is in line 499. Fire, we talked a great deal about during the budget workshop, and enhancing and increasing our investment in human capital by investing in training. And there was $38,000 in line 541. There was some confusion about that math. We added the additional 8,000 was due to the fact that we're bringing in a new firefighter to backfill the position from the EMS coordinator, emergency manager, and we do not know at this time if that candidate will or will not have their EMS certified training, in which case we would pay for that training each month to the 8,000. In Parks and Rec, we only allocated for one AED, and that is for the senior center. We've revised some of the CRA budgets for the mowing and the individual line items, as we discussed earlier. The Lake David project, which we provided some updates and will provide more in the manager's report later this evening. We started with this week. Did CPWH show up today? And they're starting an evaluation with Dan and our CRA manager to kind of make sure we're on the right course with complete Lake David Park improvements, which include some kind of band shell stage area as currently envisioned. We have actually taken the direction from the mayor and council and explored moving the sanitation fees to the county tax bill. And certainly that won't happen for this fiscal year, but we've begun that conversation. We'll keep you posted. Also, there is some discussion maybe more about outlying expenses showing 9.5 for Villa City in outgoing CIPs. You know, that is capacity for build out of that system and isn't contemplated this fiscal year. I believe that overall is some of the details of the questions that were raised to staff prior to the meeting tonight, and we will try to answer any subsequent questions that you were.
Does the council have any questions for Mr. Hine?
I do. It's primarily on the enterprise fund. I've got quite a few that go through. Let's see, the enterprise fund 40, line 630, you're showing capital improvements of 100 or a million, 940. Oh, well, I was just going to let everybody get to it. The cap, yeah, it's on page 38.
Roll-up shows you 940.
Well, it shows capital improvements is what it says, of $1,940,000 with $495,000 being new. But what are those exactly for? Were they created by new growth?
Actually, Mr. Smith, I think what Mr. Laux was looking at initially was the roll-up line, account number 630, that shows $1,940,000, which will then be split out in each individual fund. You'll see how that gets rolled up. Like for instance,
Right, I understand. I've already looked at how they're split out, but my question is, was that for new growth?
The $495,000, excuse me, is the grant portion of the funding for the Lower Floridian Wells, Villa City. So that's a growth-related expense.
You mean the one that we haven't applied for yet?
That is correct.
Okay, but yet you're budgeting it into this budget, which is raising the bottom line, the Public Works Department total, by $495,000.
Madam Mayor.
So then it's showing a deficit of $814,000. I'm just trying to figure out exactly how this is laid out. I'm a little confused of why we're budgeting money we haven't even applied for and may not get, and then adding it to our bottom line. Maybe I'm missing something, but
Madam Mayor, members of the appropriate government accounting practices to include capacity to fund the capital programs that you anticipate or may occur, because if you don't budget for them, you don't have the authorization or the capacity to make those expenses.
Okay, well, on that particular item, the well, it's not, but we can get down to the rest. But there again, it appears to me that if we're budgeting that, but we haven't applied for it and don't have it yet, but yet we're claiming to have an $814,000 deficit. If we eliminated that, we wouldn't have an $814,000 deficit anymore.
Mr. Laus, let me put that into, let me try to relate it to this. In the general fund, we also budgeted for, I don't know, 7 or 8 new people. Well, we haven't hired them yet, but we anticipate doing so. So it's no different than basically putting aside and budgeting $495,000 for an expense to happen in 2018, 2019, because without it, we wouldn't be able to apply for it because we wouldn't necessarily have the money. So having a budgeting number in here is no different than what we did in the general fund with regards to budgeting for operating expenses or anything else. So I can understand, again, the concern about not having applied for something yet, but we're going to. The bigger issue, which I planned on touching on, is the use of $815,000 out of the sanitation to actually balance the enterprise fund. But I'll reserve my comments. I just wanted to just say that I think it's prudent to budget for something, just like it's prudent to have budgeted for 7 or 8 new employees. It's the same concept.
Yeah, but there's a huge difference from my perspective. The fact is, we are going to hire those employees. We're putting a figure in here for a grant that we haven't even applied for yet. And we have no idea if we're going to get it. And we're adding it into our proposed budget. Now, if we do get it, of course, that'll reduce that figure, and then our $814,000 deficit will drop.
Madam
So
Mayor,
to say that we
so
actually
that's actually incorrect. Sorry, Mr. Lance. But there's a corresponding revenue side as well. Obviously, I know you've looked at it. If you look at the revenue side, state funding St. John's FDP, there's a corresponding $495,000 revenue. So if you don't get the revenue, you don't have the expense. And vice versa, so there's no change in deficit.
So if you took the revenue out, you take the expense out, you're back down to zero. So there's really no effect other than an anticipated $495 in revenue and anticipated $495 in expense. If we wanted to strip it out of there, it wouldn't hurt anything, but it's there to basically give us a benchmark with which to move forward and making sure that we don't lose anything. If we don't collect it, it's no harm because we won't be able to spend it.
precisely, and I agree, but to say that we have an $814,000 deficit in the enterprise fund is somewhat, it's not misleading, but it's somewhat confusing based on the way we first take a glance at this. In reality, we strip that out. It would be,
You're still going to have the 814 deficit. This allows, if I took the 495 out of my revenue and take my 495 out of expenses, I'm still left with $814,000, which is the bigger problem.
next question is the $495,000 is capital improvement. Now, what's the rest of it for? There's way over $1,400,000 in your capital improvement. So what exactly are those going on? What are we paying for? My concern is that we're spending end users' rates on capital projects, and it's always been my concern. We talk about raising waterway rates on a flood water rate study, but yet, if I'm understanding this correctly, we're still using capital. We're still paying for capital projects associated with new growth that should have been paid for with impact fees. So we're still doing the same thing that we've always done, and that's where I'm a little bit confused.
Madam Mayor, members of the council, Councilman Locks, I appreciate that your philosophical view concerning water rate users subsidizing new growth is not a new concept, not a new discussion. The fact is, this budget represents an imbalance the other way. At the end of the day, the taxpayers are paying to run the enterprise fund through rates and through through the use of discretionary taxes that could otherwise be utilized for general public benefit.
Oh, no, and I fully understand the position the city's in. My question is, what can we do to correct this? Raising water rates is not going to correct this particular problem. And that I have a great concern about that. If we're not collecting the proper amount of impact fees to do for new growth to support itself, then why in the world does, I look around and see a lot of homeowners here, they've already paid impact fees once, why are they paying them again for other homes? And then a water rate on top of that. They're paying double for the same thing. And that's always been a very sore spot. I think I bring it up every budget cycle. And I fail to understand why new growth can't pay for itself.
I guess I'm just saying, I'm kind of getting lost here because as I understand the way we constructed the budget, the impact fees are different line areas altogether. This is not the impact fees. This is the enterprise fund. It's the operating budget that we actually have this year. It's not anything to do with new growth. This $1 million to do sunshine is to do water main replacement, another $400,000, do something else. This capital improvements that are listed here are within the current operating enterprise fund. Now, there are things to do in terms of Little City Well, there's things to do in terms of the Laviance and so forth like that, and those are all under the impact fund budget as I saw it. I didn't see them in here as a funding line item within, I didn't see anything for Laviance or Little City as part of the enterprise fund budget. Maybe I missed it, so.
Yeah,
Account
that was my
630 is
question.
capital.
Right.
Account 630 is impact fees. Account 630 will also include discretionary. And the $1 million, Mr. Laus, that you're talking about for this particular Sunset Avenue water main, that $1 million is actually coming out of discretionary tax. It's not coming out of impact. But line 630 on our budget does have both impact fees being budgeted as well as any type of discretionary. And I think it also can have operating revenues as well that can come out of line 630 as well. But typically, that's the major sources for the capital.
So, and that was my initial question. Is there any part of this capital improvement that is associated with new growth? If there is, then it needs to come out of impact fees. If it isn't, then it needs to come out of end user rates. That was my initial question in this conversation.
Yeah, and I understand that, and I agree with you. But this particular item for the water main is not, it says it's a replacement. It's not classified as a impact fee related item because it's a replacement for Sunset Avenue. That's why it's coming out of discretionary, correct?
Right, and that's similar to what you told me what the 1.5 million was in the first place. We did end the conversation a long time ago. I just asked if it was for new growth or not.
I think where that is over there on page 40. It's got the breakdown of what those two items that make up that $1.5 million.
And then you also got $180,000 for Sunshine Wastewater Treatment Plan. That comes out of that $1,940,000. And it looks as if the SCADA is coming out of that $1,940,000 and rehab lift stations.
That's fine. Ask was it for new growth or not? 632. Fund again. It's on page 43. Alternative water supply development. We're not showing anything at all across that. It's on page 43 at the bottom.
43.
Yeah. Well, mine's 43, but guys, okay. And just hold that thought on that particular line for 1 second, and I'm going to go all the way down to page 47. Very bottom of it, we've got reclaimed alternative water source, and then we're showing funded by impact fees at $100,000 apiece. I think that these two lines need to be switched for the simple reason is we don't have a reclaimed impact fee. So it's going to come out of the same department. It doesn't make any difference. It's just concerning that you showed an alternative water source in a reclaimed, which we don't have a reclaimed impact fee. I think it actually should be in the water department.
Actually, Mr. Louds, if I can ask Dave, on the, and I'm looking at the first, or the first budget meeting, and in the back it tells you the assets and what funding sources, and then this $75,000 we talked about.
Download the app today for All Nations TV. Get your praise on. Remember, our mission is ministry on the go. Thank you.